The Echo Chamber. Part 1, The Last Sound. Chapter 1. The soundproof room in the Body Iron Haven was a city that chewed up dreams and spat out rust. Tucked in the armpit of upstate New York, its skyline was a jagged scar of smokestacks and half-lit neon signs, flickering like the last breaths of a dying star. Winter had sunk its teeth into the streets, the air thick with frost and the acrid bite of coal smoke from the factories that never quite shut down. On the edge of the industrial district, in a renovated warehouse turned art studio, Detective Lena Voss stood before a soundproof chamber, its steel door ajar like a confession half-spoken. Inside, Elias Kane lay slumped against the padded wall, his body a still life of despair. His eyes were wide, unblinking, as if staring into a truth too vast to hold. A thin trickle of blood had dried from his left ear, pooling on the foam floor in a crimson halo. Above him, scratched into the soundproof padding with jagged, desperate strokes, were the words, "I heard what I shouldn't have heard." The letters were uneven, carved by a fingernail, not a tool, panic etched into permanence. Lena, 42, had seen her share of bodies in her 15 years on the force, but this one felt wrong. The chamber was a cube of silence, its walls designed to swallow sound, leaving nothing but the hum of your own blood in your ears. No windows, no cameras, no signs of a struggle. The police report was already written in her partner's head. Suicide induced by psychosis. Case closed. But Lena's gut, honed by years of sniffing out lies in Iron Haven's underbelly, told her otherwise. Detective Mark Halpern, a chain-smoking cynic with a paunch and a permanent scowl, leaned against the warehouse wall outside, his cigarette glowing in the gray dawn. Guy lost it, Lena. Locked himself in, scratched his little poem, and checked out. Happens in this city. You've seen the type. Artsy, head full of static. Lena's eyes lingered on the chamber's door, its bolts gleaming like teeth. No one builds a room like this to die in unless they're running from something louder than their own thoughts. Halpern snorted, exhaling smoke into the frigid air. "You're seeing ghosts again." Lena ignored him, stepping back into the chamber. The air was heavy, sterile, the kind of quiet that pressed against your skull. She crouched beside Elias, noting his hands, calloused, smudged with ink, but no defensive wounds. His nails were torn, one bloody from scratching the message. She traced the words with her gloved finger, feeling the shallow grooves. This wasn't a manifesto, it was a warning. The crime scene techs had already swept the room, finding nothing but Elias's fingerprints and a single drop of blood. No weapons, no drugs, no note beyond the wall's cryptic scrawl. The lock was internal, designed to be opened only from the inside. A perfect puzzle, and Lena hated puzzles that screamed solved too easily. She stepped outside, the cold biting her face. Who found him? Halpern flicked his cigarette into the snow. His wife, Clara Kane, journalist. She's at the precinct, tearing into anyone who'll listen. Lena nodded, her breath clouding in the air. Let's go hear her scream. Chapter 2. The Wife Who Refused the Quiet. The precinct was a hive of fluorescent lights and stale coffee, its walls plastered with faded wanted posters and memos no one read. Clara Kane sat in an interrogation room, though it wasn't an interrogation. She demanded to be there, her voice carrying through the precinct like a blade. Lena watched her through the one-way glass. Clara was 35, sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun, and eyes that burned with grief and fury. She clutched a photo of Elias, his smile soft against the gray backdrop of Iron Haven's waterfront. Lena entered, sliding into the chair across from Clara. "Mrs. Kane, I'm Detective Voss. I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't!" Clara snapped, her voice raw. "Don't give me platitudes. Elias didn't kill himself. He was murdered." Lena leaned back, studying her. Clara's hands trembled, but her gaze was steady, unyielding. "The evidence suggests suicide," Lena said, keeping her tone neutral. "No signs of forced entry, no other fingerprints. He locked himself in." Clara slammed the photo on the table. Elias wasn't suicidal. He was scared. He'd been working on something big. He called it a sound that shouldn't exist, said it was dangerous that they were watching. Lena's pen paused over her notebook. They? Clara leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. He wouldn't say who, just that they were listening. He started recording everything. Meetings, phone calls, even his own thoughts. Said it was the only way to prove he wasn't crazy. Where are those recordings? Lena asked. Gone, Clara said, her jaw tightening. Stolen from his studio the night he died. Someone cleaned it out. His drives, his notes, everything. Lena's gut twisted. A suicide didn't erase their own tracks. She scribbled a note. Check studio logs. Did Elias mention anyone specific? A name? A place? Clara shook her head, frustration carving lines into her face. He was paranoid but not delusional. He mentioned a case from years ago, the Soundwave murders. Said it was connected. That's why I need Dr. Alaric Shaw. Lena frowned. Shaw? The shrink who worked with the FBI? He solved the Soundwave case, Clara said. Elias thought he'd understand what was happening. If anyone can figure this out, it's him. Lena handed Clara her card. If you find anything, recordings, notes, anything, call me, day or night. Clara took the card, her fingers brushing Lena's. I'm not waiting for you to catch up, detective. I'm finding Shaw. Lena watched her leave, the photo of Elias still on the table. She picked it up, studying his face. He didn't look like a man ready to die. He looked like a man who'd heard something he couldn't unhear. Chapter 3. Shaw, the Decoder of Echoes. Dr. Alaric Shaw's brownstone was a fortress of solitude on the edge of Ironhaven, its windows dark, its brick facade crumbling like the city itself. Inside, the air smelled of old books and ozone, the walls lined with shelves of neuropsychology texts, acoustic theory journals, and vintage phonographs that gleamed like relics of a forgotten era. At 45, Shaw was a shadow of the man who'd once consulted for the FBI. His name whispered in Quantico's halls as the one who saw patterns where others saw noise. His mild autism made him a cipher to most, blunt, obsessive, with a memory that cataloged details like a machine. He'd retired a decade ago after the Soundwave murders, a case that left him hollow, though he'd never admit why. Clara found him in his study, surrounded by oscilloscopes and speakers, their wires tangled like veins. Shaw sat at a desk cluttered with graphs of sound waves, his lean frame hunched, his gray eyes fixed on a screen displaying a frequency curve. He didn't look up as she entered. Dr. Shaw, Clara said, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. I need your help. My husband didn't kill himself. He was murdered. Shaw's fingers paused on the keyboard, a faint twitch betraying his interest. He didn't look at the photo she slid across the desk. Why me? His voice was low, precise, with a faint British lilt from years studying abroad. You solved the Soundwave case, Clara said. Elias mentioned it. He said you'd understand. Shaw's gaze flicked to the air, as if tracing invisible threads. Tell me about the room. Clara recounted the details. The soundproof chamber, the blood from Elias's ear, the scratched words on the wall. Shaw's expression didn't change, but his fingers drummed a rhythm on the desk, a tick he couldn't suppress. A soundproof room is a paradox, he said. It keeps sound out, but it traps what's inside. What did your husband hear? I don't know, Clara admitted, her voice cracking, but I think it killed him. Shaw stood, moving to a phonograph and running his hand over its horn. The Soundwave case involved audio manipulation, subliminal frequencies that drove people to act against their will. Your husband's message suggests he heard something similar, something forbidden. Clara's breath caught. Will you take the case? Shaw turned, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. They were sharp, almost inhuman in their focus. Not for you, he said. For the logic. The phrase I heard what I shouldn't have heard is an error, a fracture in reason. I can't ignore it. Clara nodded, relief warring with dread. What do you need? Everything, Shaw said. His notes, his work, his fears, and access to that room. Chapter 4. Sounds Unrecorded. Dawn broke over Ironhaven, the sky a bruise of gray and violet. Shaw stood in the warehouse studio, the soundproof chamber looming like a tomb. Lena Voss met him there, her skepticism etched into the lines of her face. "You're the shrink who hears ghosts, right?" she said, her arms crossed. "I hear what others miss," Shaw replied, stepping into the chamber. The silence was oppressive, a void that pressed against his eardrums. He closed his eyes, letting his senses adjust. His autism heightened his perception of patterns, sounds, textures, rhythms, but it also made silence a kind of violence. He stood where Elias had died, the bloodstain a dark map on the floor. Lena watched, her curiosity outweighing her doubt. "What are you looking for?" Shaw ran his fingers over the scratched words, feeling the desperation in their shallow grooves. "This wasn't a confession," he said. "It was a warning." He tilted his head, catching a faint hum, almost subsonic, emanating from the ventilation system. "This room wasn't silent." Lena frowned. "The techs checked, no audio devices." "Then they checked wrong," Shaw said. He examined the vents, finding a tiny speaker embedded in the grill, its wires severed. "Someone piped something in, a frequency, maybe an audible." Lena's eyes narrowed. "You're saying he was killed by sound?" "Not killed," Shaw said. "Driven. Sound can manipulate the mind, induce panic, dissociation, even death if it triggers the right response." Lena radioed for a tech to analyze the speaker, but Shaw's attention was elsewhere. He requested access to Elias's work files, only to learn they'd been wiped from the studio servers. The backups were gone too, stolen the night of his death. Whoever cleaned up had been thorough, surgical. Back at his brownstone, Shaw pored over Clara's notes and Elias's surviving journal, a tattered notebook Clara had found in their apartment. The entries were erratic, written in bursts of paranoia. "The sound knows me. It's in my head, rewriting me." Shaw's pulse quickened. He'd seen those words before, in the Soundwave case files buried in a victim's diary. A coincidence? He didn't believe in those. He played a sample of white noise through his speakers, calibrating it to mimic the hum he'd heard in the chamber. The frequency was low, around 19 hertz, just below human hearing. It made his teeth ache, his thoughts blur. He shut it off, his hands shaking. Whatever Elias had heard, it wasn't just sound, it was a weapon. Clara arrived, her face pale. "I found something," she said, holding out a USB drive. "Elias hid this in our apartment. It's encrypted, but there's one file I could open, a log. He wrote about a meeting with someone called the Overseer, said they knew about the sound." Shaw took the drive, his mind already mapping the next step. "The Overseer," he murmured, "that's who we're hunting." Part 2, Those Who Heard. Chapter 5. A Witness's Torn Memory. Ironhaven's streets were a labyrinth of ice and shadow, the kind of city that whispered secrets in the wind, but never loud enough to hear clearly. Dr. Alaric Shaw navigated the cracked sidewalks of the lower ward, his coat pulled tight against the biting cold. His destination was a crumbling tenement where Mia Torres, a sound designer who'd worked with Elias Kane, lived in self-imposed exile. Clara had found her name in Elias's journal, a single entry scrawled in frantic ink. Mia heard it too. She's not safe. Mia's apartment was a shrine to chaos. Empty wine bottles cluttered the floor, microphones lay unplugged like dead snakes, and the air smelled of stale smoke and despair. Mia herself was a ghost of a woman, mid-30s, with hollow cheeks and eyes that darted like trapped birds. She sat on a sagging couch, clutching a glass of red wine that trembled in her hand. "I heard it," Mia whispered as Shaw sat across from her, his notebook open. "A hum, low, like a heartbeat, but wrong. Elias said it was alive." Shaw's fingers twitched, a tick he couldn't suppress when his mind caught a pattern. "Describe it," he said, his voice calm but sharp, cutting through the room's haze. Mia's gaze drifted to the ceiling, as if the sound lingered there. "It was in the studio during our last session. Elias was tweaking a track for his installation. He played something, a loop, maybe 20 seconds long. It felt like needles in my brain. I don't remember what happened after that, just waking up with blood in my ears." Shaw leaned forward, his gray eyes locking onto hers. "Blood? Like Elias?" She nodded, her hands shaking so violently that wine sloshed onto the couch. I thought I was dying. Elias was screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then, nothing. A blackout. Shaw recognized the signs. Dissociative amnesia, possibly induced by trauma or something more sinister. He set his notebook aside and pulled a small metronome from his pocket, its rhythmic tick filling the silence. I'd like to try hypnosis, he said, to recover what you've lost. Mia hesitated, then nodded. Shaw's voice softened, guiding her into a trance. The metronome's steady beat anchored her as he probed her subconscious. You're in the studio with Elias, he said. What do you see? Mia's voice was distant, dreamlike. Lights flickering, Elias at the console, his hands shaking. The sound starts, low, pulsing. It's not just sound, it's alive. Like it knows me. Her breathing quickened. Elias screams, "They're here!" Then darkness. Shaw stopped the session, his mind racing. The sound wasn't just a frequency, it was a trigger, designed to fracture memory. He left Mia with a warning. Don't listen to anything you don't trust, and lock your doors. As he stepped into the snowy street, Shaw's thoughts churned. Mia's blackout mirrored symptoms he'd seen in the Soundwave murders, where victims described a sound that rewrote their thoughts. Whoever killed Elias wasn't just silencing him, they were erasing him. Chapter 6. The 2013 Mass Suicide Connection. Clara Kane sat in her apartment, surrounded by stacks of files and empty coffee cups, her laptop casting a blue glow across her face. She'd spent days digging into Elias's past, chasing the thread of the Soundwave murders he'd mentioned. A tip from a source at the Iron Haven Herald led her to a 2013 case. 6 people, part of an experimental therapy group, found dead in a locked room at the Iron Haven Psychiatric Institute. Each had blood in their ears and their bodies were covered in scrawled messages. The sound knows us. The police ruled it a mass suicide, blaming a cult-like obsession with healing frequencies. But Clara smelled a cover-up. She called Shaw, her voice tight with urgency. Elias was an intern at the Institute in 2013. He worked on their audio equipment. Whatever happened back then, it's connected to his death. Shaw arrived at her apartment, his coat dusted with snow. He spread the 2013 case files across her table, his eyes scanning the reports with machine-like precision. The victims were diverse, a teacher, a mechanic, a librarian, but all had been part of a program called Acoustic Resonance Therapy, led by Dr. Evelyn Marr, a psychiatrist with a reputation for unorthodox methods. The program promised to treat trauma through sound, but after the deaths, it was shut down, its records sealed. Shaw cross-referenced the case with his old FBI files, accessed through a back-channel contact. One detail stood out. The therapy group had used a soundproof chamber, identical to the one where Elias died. This isn't a coincidence, Shaw said, his voice low. The sound was the weapon then, and it is now. Clara's hands clenched. Why would Elias go back to something that killed 6 people? He didn't, Shaw said. He found it again. Someone's been refining this for years. They drove to the precinct to meet Lena Voss, who was skeptical but willing to listen. You're saying someone's been killing with sound since 2013? Lena asked, her arms crossed. That's a stretch. Even for you, Shaw. Shaw tapped the file. The victims in 2013 showed the same symptoms as Elias. Blood in the ears, cryptic messages, no signs of external trauma. The soundproof chamber wasn't for therapy, it was for control. Lena sighed, rubbing her temples. I'll pull the sealed records, but don't expect miracles. Shaw's eyes narrowed. Miracles are for the desperate. I deal in patterns. Chapter 7. The spliced tape and the newsroom basement. Clara's source at the Iron Haven Herald, a nervous archivist named Tom Weiss, slipped her a key to the newspaper's basement storage. Elias used to hide stuff down there, Tom whispered over a burner phone. Backup drives, tapes. He didn't trust his studio. Clara and Shaw descended into the basement at midnight, the air thick with dust and the hum of fluorescent lights. The storage room was a maze of boxes and filing cabinets, labeled with decades of Ironhaven's secrets. Clara found a metal lockbox tucked behind a stack of moldy papers, its label scratched out. Inside was a single audio tape, labeled Echo 7 in Elias's handwriting. They took the tape to Shaw's brownstone, where his study was a fortress of analog equipment. Reel-to-reel players, spectrum analyzers, and speakers older than Clara. He fed the tape into a player, the hiss of static filling the room. The audio was garbled, a mix of low hums and distorted voices. Shaw adjusted the equalizer, isolating fragments. A man's voice, not Elias's, saying, "You can't unhear it." A woman's voice pleading, "Make it stop." Shaw's fingers froze on the controls. "This isn't a recording of a session," he said. "It's a confession." Clara's pulse raced. "Whose?" Shaw shook his head. "The voices are layered, spliced. Someone didn't want them identified." He traced the tape's metadata, finding a timestamp pointing to a decommissioned psychiatric facility on Ironhaven's outskirts, the same one tied to the 2013 deaths. They drove there under a sky heavy with snow, the facility a hulking skeleton of concrete and broken windows. The basement was locked, but Clara's lock-picking skills, honed from years of investigative journalism, got them in. The room was a hidden studio, microphones, speakers, and a chair rigged with restraints. Shaw's stomach churned. "This wasn't therapy," he said. "This was interrogation." Clara's flashlight caught a glint, a tiny recorder, its tape missing. "They were here," she said, "after Elias." Shaw nodded, his mind mapping the pattern. The studio, the tape, the chamber, they were pieces of a machine, one that turned sound into a weapon. Chapter 8. A Confession. Without an owner, back at Shaw's brownstone, he played the Echo 7 tape again, filtering out noise with surgical precision. A new phrase emerged from the static. "The echo chamber is in you." Shaw's breath caught. The phrase wasn't literal. It described a psychological state, a feedback loop of manipulated memories. Someone was using sound to reprogram thoughts, planting confessions that drove people to death. Clara's voice shook as she listened. Elias wasn't suicidal. He was trying to expose this. Shaw nodded, his eyes fixed on the oscilloscope's dancing lines. And someone made sure he'd never speak. He cross-referenced the tape's frequency with his notes from the Soundwave case. The hum matched 19 hertz, just below human hearing, capable of inducing panic, dissociation, even auditory hallucinations. The 2013 victims had heard it too, their messages echoing Elias's. "The sound knows us." Clara paced, her hands clenched. "Who's doing this? And why?" Shaw's mind raced, piecing together the pattern. "The overseer," he said, recalling Elias's log. "Someone with access to the institute, the studio, and Elias's work. Someone who knows how to weaponize sound." Clara stopped, her eyes blazing. "Then we find them. Before they find us." Shaw's fingers twitched, his tic flaring under the weight of the mystery. The tape's voices lingered in his mind, a chorus of ghosts. He knew the sound wasn't just killing, it was rewriting reality, one mind at a time. Part 3, The Echo Chamber. Chapter 9. The Map of the Mind. Ironhaven was a city that wore its despair like a second skin, its streets choked with snow that fell in relentless sheets, blanketing the cracked asphalt and rusted smokestacks in a shroud of white. The winter of 2025 was merciless, the kind that seeped into your bones and whispered of surrender. Dr. Alaric Shaw stood in the dim glow of his brownstone study, a sanctuary of chaos where books on neuropsychology and acoustic theory teetered in precarious stacks, their spines worn from years of obsessive consultation. The air smelled of old paper, ozone, and the faint metallic tang of his vintage phonographs, their brass horns gleaming like relics of a bygone era. At 45, Shaw was a man carved by his own mind, lean, sharp-featured, with gray eyes that seemed to dissect the world into fragments of logic. His mild autism, a lens that sharpened his perception of patterns, also made him a stranger in a city that thrived on noise and distraction. His fingers twitched, a rhythmic tick that flared when his thoughts snagged on a puzzle. And tonight, the puzzle was a web of death that refused to resolve. The corkboard dominating one wall was a labyrinth of red string and pinned photographs, a map of Iron Haven's darkest secrets. At its center was Elias Kane, his death in the soundproof chamber, a splinter in Shaw's mind. Radiating outward were other victims: a musician in 2008, a radio host in 2011, the 6 members of the 2013 therapy group, all found in locked rooms, blood leaking from their ears, cryptic messages scrawled in their final moments. The phrase from the Echo 7 tape, "The echo chamber is in you," looped in Shaw's thoughts. Not just a taunt, but a blueprint for something sinister. Someone was using sound to rewrite minds, planting thoughts that drove victims to despair or death, and Elias had been the latest casualty. Clara Kane arrived at dusk, her boots leaving wet tracks on the hardwood floor. Her face was pale, her dark hair escaping its bun in wild strands, but her eyes burned with a fire that hadn't dimmed since Elias's death. She carried a folder thick with documents, the product of sleepless nights scouring public records and bribing sources at the Iron Haven Herald. "I dug into Dr. Evelyn Marr," she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. She spread the papers across Shaw's desk, revealing financial records, grant applications, and a grainy photo of a woman in her late 50s, her silver hair pinned neatly, her smile practiced. Marr's running a private clinic uptown, funded by a shell company tied to Iron Haven's elite. Politicians, CEOs, even Senator Paul Hargrove. Shaw's eyes scanned the documents, his mind cataloging details with machine-like precision. Marr had overseen the 2013 acoustic resonance therapy program, where 6 patients died in a locked room, their deaths dismissed as a mass suicide. Elias had been an intern at the institute, calibrating their audio equipment. Now Marr was linked to Elias's final project, a sound installation that had drawn the attention of someone called the Overseer. Shaw's fingers paused on a name in the financial records: Victor Crane, an audio engineer with no public footprint, only a P.O. box and a history of classified projects. "Crane," Shaw murmured, his tick flaring. "He's the overseer from Elias's log." Clara nodded, her hands clenching the folder's edge. "He's a ghost, but he's funding Marr's work. I set up a meeting with her tomorrow, said I'm writing a story on grief therapy." She took the bait. Shaw's gaze flicked to the corkboard, where Crane's name was now pinned, a new node in the web. "Be careful, Clara," he said, his voice low, precise. "Marr's not just a doctor. She's a gatekeeper, protecting something bigger." Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm not afraid of her." "You should be," Shaw said, his eyes meeting hers for a moment before darting away, a reflex of his autism. "She's part of the machine." That afternoon, Shaw drove through Iron Haven's frozen streets to Marr's clinic, a glass monolith that gleamed like a false promise against the city's decay. The lobby was sterile, its white walls and minimalist furniture a stark contrast to the rust and grime outside. The receptionist, a young woman with nervous eyes and a forced smile, ushered him into Marr's office. Dr. Evelyn Marr sat behind a mahogany desk, her silver hair catching the light, her posture radiating control. "Dr. Shaw," she said, her voice smooth as velvet, gesturing to a leather chair. "Your reputation precedes you. The Soundwave murders, wasn't it? Quite a case." Shaw sat, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the desk's edge to avoid her gaze. "Elias Kane," he said, cutting through her pleasantries. "He died in a soundproof chamber, like your 2013 therapy group. I'm curious about your methods, Doctor." Marr's smile didn't falter, but Shaw caught a flicker in her eyes, a micro-expression of unease. "Elias was troubled," she said, folding her hands. "He was obsessed with sounds no one else heard, hallucinations perhaps. I offered treatment, but he refused." "What kind of treatment?" Shaw pressed, his voice cold, his fingers drumming faintly on his knee. Marr leaned back, her fingers steepled. "Confidentiality, Dr. Shaw. You of all people should understand. My work focuses on trauma, using sound to rewire neural pathways. It's experimental, but hardly sinister." Shaw's mind snagged on her words. Rewire neural pathways. The Echo 7 tape's frequency, 19 hertz, was designed for exactly that. He stood, his height casting a shadow across her desk. "I know how silence works, Doctor. It hides more than it heals." As he left, he caught a faint hum from the office's ventilation system, a low thrum that vibrated in his chest. It was 19 hertz, the same frequency that had haunted Elias. Mar wasn't just a gatekeeper. She was a cog in the echo chamber. Chapter 10. The Secret Treatment Room. The Ironhaven Herald's basement was a crypt of forgotten stories, its air thick with dust and the faint hum of flickering fluorescence. Clara's source, Tom Weiss, had slipped her a set of blueprints from the city archives detailing the decommissioned Ironhaven Psychiatric Institute. The plans revealed a hidden wing, unmarked, labeled only as Sensory Lab. Clara showed the documents to Shaw and Detective Lena Voss over coffee at a diner on the edge of town, its windows fogged with condensation, the air heavy with the scent of burnt grease and stale cigarettes. Lena, her dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail, frowned at the blueprints. "This wing wasn't in the 2013 police report," she said, her voice laced with skepticism. "Why hide a therapy room? And why wasn't it searched after the suicides?" Shaw traced the blueprint's lines with a finger, his mind mapping the institute's layout. "It wasn't for therapy," he said, his voice low, precise. "It was for experiments, sound-based, like Elias's chamber. Someone used subsonic frequencies to manipulate the brain, inducing panic, dissociation, even memory distortion." Lena's brow furrowed, her skepticism warring with curiosity. "You're saying they killed 6 people with sound, then covered it up? That's a hell of a leap, Shaw." "It's not a leap," Shaw replied, his eyes fixed on the blueprint. "It's a pattern. Elias found it, and it killed him." Clara leaned forward, her hands gripping her coffee mug. "We need to see that room. If it's still there, it's evidence." Lena sighed, rubbing her temples. "I can't get a warrant on a hunch, but I can look the other way if you two want to take a late-night stroll." That night, under a moonless sky that pressed down like a lid, Shaw and Lena infiltrated the institute. The building was a decaying giant, its concrete walls cracked, its windows shattered, letting snow drift into the halls like ash. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating faded signs and overturned gurneys, remnants of a place that had once promised healing, but delivered only silence. Using the blueprints, they found the hidden wing, its entrance concealed behind a rusted filing cabinet in a storage room. Shaw pushed the cabinet aside, revealing a steel door with a keypad, its code long deactivated. Clara, who'd insisted on joining despite Lena's protests, knelt with a lock-picking kit, her hands steady from years of breaking into places she didn't belong. The door clicked open, revealing a sensory deprivation chamber that mirrored Elias's studio. Walls padded with soundproof foam, a single chair bolted to the floor, and a ceiling embedded with tiny speakers, their wires snaking to a control panel covered in dust. Shaw stepped inside, the silence pressing against his eardrums like a physical force. He played a low-frequency tone through a portable device, calibrating it to 19 hertz. The room amplified it, creating a pressure that made his teeth ache, his thoughts blur. "This is it," he said, his voice barely audible over the hum. "The echo chamber. They use subsonic frequencies to manipulate the brain. Panic, dissociation, memory distortion. It's not just a room, it's a weapon." Lena's flashlight caught a glint in the corner. A tiny camera, its lens scratched out, as if someone had tried to erase its gaze. "Someone didn't want to be seen," she said, her voice tight with unease. "Or heard," Shaw corrected, his mind racing. He examined the control panel, finding a log of sessions dated from 2008 to 2013. The final entry, dated the day of the 2013 suicides, listed Elias Kane as a participant, marked terminated. Shaw's pulse quickened, his tic flaring. He wasn't a patient, he was a threat. He knew what they were doing. Lena bagged the camera for analysis, her skepticism fading into grim determination. "This is bigger than one murder, isn't it? This is a goddamn conspiracy." Shaw nodded, his eyes scanning the room's sterile walls. "It's a system, Lena, and it's still running." Chapter 11, The Silent Overseer. Back at his brownstone, Shaw dove into Victor Crane's shadow, his study a fortress of flickering screens and humming equipment. Clara's source had confirmed Crane's presence at the 2013 therapy sessions, observing from behind a one-way mirror, his role undocumented in official reports. Shaw found a single trace of Crane in an old patent filing, buried in a database of classified projects. A device for auditory neural modulation, designed to alter brain activity through subsonic frequencies. The patent was co-signed by Dr. Evelyn Marr, linking her directly to Crane's work. Clara stormed into the study, her coat dusted with snow, her eyes blazing with new information. "I met with Marr," she said, slamming a notebook on Shaw's desk. "I played the grieving widow, asked about her therapy methods. When I mentioned Elias's tape, she shut down, said I was chasing ghosts. But I saw her hands shake. She's scared, Alaric." Shaw handed her a printout of the patent, his voice low. "She should be. Crane's device, it's the weapon. It plants memories, erases others. Elias found it, and they silenced him." Clara read the patent, her hands trembling. "Who's they? Marr, Crane, who else?" "The overseer," Shaw said, recalling Elias's log. "Crane's not working alone. Someone with power is pulling the strings, someone who can bury records and silence whistleblowers." Lena called from the precinct, her voice tense. "I traced the camera from the Institute. Partial serial number links it to a security firm tied to Senator Paul Hargrove. He was a consultant on the 2013 therapy program, his name redacted in the sealed files." Shaw's mind clicked, a new piece snapping into place. Hargrove, a rising star in Ironhaven's political scene, had championed mental health reform, his speeches polished but hollow. Shaw remembered interviewing him during the Soundwave murders, a decade ago, when Hargrove dismissed the cult's audio experiments as pseudoscience. Now the connection was undeniable. Shaw returned to Marr's clinic, this time with the Echo 7 tape. He played it in her office, the distorted voices filling the sterile space. Marr's composure cracked, her hands gripping the desk, her eyes darting to the door. "You don't understand what you're chasing," she hissed, her voice low, almost a growl. "Some sounds are better left buried, Doctor." "Shaw, walk away." Shaw leaned closer, his voice colder than the winter outside. "And some truths are louder than silence. Who's the overseer, Evelyn?" Marr's face paled, but she said nothing, her silence a wall. As Shaw left, he noticed a faint scar behind her ear, hidden by her hair. It wasn't just a mark, it was a signature, like the blood in Elias's ears. Marr wasn't just complicit, she was a victim too. Chapter 12. Shaw trapped between memories. The night was a void, Ironhaven's skyline swallowed by snow and darkness. Shaw sat in his study, the Echo 7 tape looping through his speakers, its 19 hertz hum a pulse that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. He dreamed of the Soundwave murders, the cult leader's voice weaving through his mind, urging him to forget. Faces flashed, victims with wide eyes, blood trickling from their ears, their hands clutching scrawled messages. He woke with a start, his nose bleeding, the hum still ringing in his ears. The tape was affecting him, blurring the line between his memories and Elias's, between reality and the echo chamber's lies. He stared at his corkboard, the red strings blurring into a web of doubt. Was he chasing a real killer, or was his mind reconstructing patterns that didn't exist? His autism, a gift for seeing order in chaos, was also a curse, amplifying his obsession until it consumed him. The hum was in him now, a splinter he couldn't extract. Clara found him at dawn, slumped in his chair, the oscilloscope's lines dancing like ghosts. "You look like hell, Alaric," she said, setting a coffee mug beside him. Her voice was soft, a rare moment of warmth in her relentless drive. Shaw rubbed his eyes, his voice hoarse. "The sound, it's in me now. I can't tell what's mine and what's theirs. Elias's words, the tape, the hum, it's rewriting me." Clara's hand rested on his shoulder, a steady anchor. "You're not crazy, Alaric. Elias trusted you. I trust you. You're the only one who can see this through." Shaw nodded, but the doubt lingered, a shadow in his mind. He replayed the tape, isolating a new fragment, a male voice, barely audible, whispering, "The Overseer sees all." His hands shook as he wrote the phrase on his timeline, circling Crane's name, then Hargrove's. The echo chamber wasn't just a room, it was a network, a system of manipulated minds, and Shaw was caught in its web, his own thoughts fraying at the edges. Part 4, The Final Conspiracy. Chapter 13, Hunting the Memory. Tuner Ironhaven's winter was a relentless beast, its snow piling in drifts that choked the streets and buried the city's sins under a veneer of white. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of abandoned factories, carrying a chill that seeped into Dr. Alaric Shaw's bones as he drove through the outskirts, his old sedan rattling over icy ruts. The dashboard clock glowed 3:10 a.m., its green digits a stark contrast to the darkness outside. Shaw's fingers twitched on the wheel, his tic flaring as his mind churned through the web of clues. Elias Kane's death, the 2013 suicides, the Echo 7 tape, and the shadow of Victor Crane, the audio engineer whose device turned sound into a weapon. The phrase "the Overseer sees" all looped in his thoughts, a taunt that felt like a splinter in his brain. Clara Kane sat beside him, her face pale under the sodium glow of streetlights, her hands clutching a folder of decrypted files from Elias's hidden USB drive. Crane's last known address is a radio tower, decommissioned in 2010, she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion, carving lines into her face. It's off Route 17, in the middle of nowhere. If he's there, we'll find him. Shaw nodded, his eyes fixed on the road. He's not just hiding. He's protecting something. Someone. The Overseer isn't Crane. He's a tool like Marr. Detective Lena Voss had stayed behind, pulling strings at the precinct to keep their investigation off the radar. She'd promised to meet them at the tower with backup if things went south, but Shaw knew they were walking into a trap. The 19 hertz hum from the Echo 7 tape still lingered in his ears, blurring his memories, making him question what was real. His autism, a lens that sharpened his perception of patterns, was also a curse, amplifying the sound's effects until his thoughts felt like a maze with no exit. The radio tower loomed against the horizon, a rusted spire piercing the snow-heavy sky. Its base was a concrete bunker, its windows boarded, its door sealed with a padlock. Clara's lockpicking skills made short work of it, and they stepped into a space that smelled of oil and static. The interior was a makeshift studio. Servers hummed in the corner, their lights blinking like eyes. Microphones hung from the ceiling, their cables tangled like veins, and a chair identical to the one in the Psychiatric Institute's sensory lab sat bolted to the floor, its restraints glinting in the dim light. Victor Crane stood at a console, his gaunt frame hunched, his eyes like pools of static. He was in his 60s, his hair a shock of white, his hands steady despite the intrusion. "You heard it too, didn't you?" he said, his voice calm, almost reverent. "The sound that rewrites you." Shaw's pulse quickened, his tic flaring. "You built it," he said, stepping closer, his voice cold. "A device to manipulate minds, plant memories, erase truths. Elias Kane found it, and you killed him." Crane's lips curled into a faint smile. "Not me, Doctor." "Shaw, I'm the engineer, not the architect. The sound was my creation. Yes, a frequency that syncs with the brain's alpha waves, rewriting neural pathways. But the orders came from above. Elias was a loose end, too curious for his own good. Clara's hands clenched, her voice trembling with rage. "Who gave the orders? Who's the Overseer?" Crane's eyes flickered to the door, as if expecting someone. "You're close, Mrs. Kane. Too close. The echo chamber isn't just a room, it's a network. Politicians, executives, people who need secrets buried. Elias's installation was art, but it was also a threat. He recorded the sound, tried to expose it." Shaw's mind raced, piecing together the pattern. The 2013 suicides, the musician, the radio host, they were all threats too, weren't they? "You used the sound to silence them?" Crane nodded, his smile fading. They heard what they shouldn't have heard. Like you. Before Shaw could respond, Clara lunged, grabbing a microphone stand and swinging it at Crane. He dodged, but Shaw tackled him, pinning him to the floor. "Where's the final tape?" Shaw demanded, his voice sharp. "Elias recorded everything. Where is it?" Crane's eyes gleamed with defiance. "Echo 1, it's here. But you won't like what you hear." Chapter 14. The final tape in the erased name. The bunker's air was thick with the hum of servers, their heat warring with the cold seeping through the concrete walls. Clara found the Echo 1 tape in a locked drawer, its label scrawled in Elias's handwriting. She handed it to Shaw, her hands shaking not from fear, but from the weight of what it might reveal. They bound Crane to the chair with its own restraints, his protests fading into a resigned silence. Shaw fed the tape into a player, its reels spinning with a soft hiss. Elias's voice filled the room, raw and desperate. "They're in my head. I can't stop hearing them. The sound, it knows me. It's rewriting me." The words were punctuated by static, then a scream, abruptly cut off. Shaw adjusted the player, isolating a hidden track buried beneath the noise. A list of names spoken in a monotone. Evelyn Marr, Victor Crane, Paul Hargrove. The list ended with a glitch, a deliberate erasure where a final name should have been. Shaw's breath caught. "Hargrove," he said, his voice low. "The senator. He was in your files, Clara, tied to the 2013 program, to Mars funding." Clara's eyes widened, her mind racing. Hargrove's been pushing mental health reform for years, but it's a front. He's bearing something big. Shaw played the tape again, analyzing the glitch. The erased name wasn't just a mistake, it was a signature, a mark of someone with the power to rewrite reality. He cross-referenced the tape's metadata with the 2013 case files, finding a redacted signature in the Institute's funding records. Paul Hargrove, then a city councilman, now a senator with ambitions for higher office. Crane watched them, his expression unreadable. "You're chasing a ghost," he said. "The overseer isn't just one person. It's a system, a machine that keeps Ironhaven's secrets locked away." Clara's voice was a blade. "And you built it." Crane shrugged, his eyes distant. "I built the tool. Others wielded it." Shaw's tick flared, his fingers drumming on the console. "Hargrove's the key. He's not just funding it, he's using it. To silence dissent, to erase threats. Elias was going to expose him." They left Crane bound, taking the Echo 1 tape in a hard drive of encrypted server data. As they stepped into the snow, Shaw's phone buzzed. Lena, her voice tense. "I pulled Hargrove's financials. He's got offshore accounts linked to Crane's shell company. I'm sending a team to the tower, but you need to get out now. This is bigger than we thought." Shaw's mind clicked, the pattern solidifying. Hargrove wasn't just a player. He was the architect, the overseer hiding in plain sight. Chapter 15. The case Shaw left unfinished. The snow fell harder as Shaw and Clara drove back to Ironhaven, the city's skyline a jagged wound against the dawn. Shaw's thoughts drifted to the Soundwave murders, a case that had broken him a decade ago. He'd interviewed Paul Hargrove, then a rising politician, about the cult's audio experiments. Hargrove had been dismissive, his smile polished, his aide carrying a recorder that emitted a faint hum Shaw now recognized as 19 hertz. Back then, threats to Shaw's family, anonymous notes, a car following his sister, had forced him to abandon the case, a wound that still bled in his memory. He shared the memory with Clara, his voice low, almost confessional. "I walked away," he said. "I thought I was protecting them, but I left something unfinished, something that's been killing for years." Clara's hand rested on his arm, her touch grounding. "You're finishing it now, Alaric. For Elias, for all of them." They met Lena at a safe house, a rundown apartment on the edge of town. She'd decrypted part of the server data, revealing a network of payments from Hargrove to Crane, Marr, and others, funneled through shell companies. The funds supported Project Echo, a program to develop auditory neuromodulation for behavioral correction. The 2013 suicides were test subjects, Elias a whistleblower who'd gotten too close. Shaw's mind raced, his tic flaring as he pieced together the final pattern. Hargrove used the sound to silence rivals, whistleblowers, anyone who threatened his rise. Elias's installation was going to broadcast the frequency, expose the truth. Lena's face was grim. "We need hard evidence. Hargrove's untouchable without it." Shaw handed her a copy of the Echo One tape. "This is your evidence, but we need to confront him, force him to slip." They tracked Hargrove to a gala at Ironhaven City Hall, a glittering facade of wealth and power. Shaw slipped into the event, his disheveled coat a stark contrast to the tuxedos and gowns. He found Hargrove near the bar, his smile as polished as ever. Shaw slid the Echo One tape across the counter, his voice cold. "You missed one, Senator. Elias recorded everything." Hargrove's face paled, his hand trembling as he picked up the tape. "You're playing with fire, Shaw." "Then burn," Shaw said, his eyes locking onto Hargrove's. "The echo chamber's collapsing, and you're trapped inside." Chapter 16. The ending only Shaw heard. Ironhaven's precinct was a fortress of fluorescent lights and bureaucracy, its interrogation rooms cold despite the heaters rattling in the walls. Lena led a raid on Hargrove's office, backed by the decrypted server data in the Echo One tape. They found encrypted files linking him to Project Echo, detailing experiments on unwitting subjects, politicians, journalists, even whistleblowers like Elias. The sound was a weapon used to plant false memories, induce confessions, or drive targets to suicide. Hargrove was arrested, his polished facade crumbling as he was led away in cuffs. The Ironhaven Herald ran Clara's expose, a blistering account of Project Echo and its victims. But the city buried it, as cities do, its elite closing ranks to protect their own. Crane and Marr disappeared, their shell companies dissolved, their trails erased. Shaw returned to his brownstone, the silence louder than ever. The case was closed, but the sound lingered, a ghost in his mind. He burned the Echo One tape, its ashes scattering in the snow outside. The 19 hertz hum had left scars in his thoughts, blending his memories with Elias's, making him question what was real. Was he a hero or just another victim of the echo chamber? Clara visited, her face softer but still haunted. "We did it," she said, her voice quiet. "Elias would be proud." Shaw nodded, his eyes on the corkboard, now bare. "The sound's gone, but it's not silent. It's in the city, in the minds of those who heard it." Clara left, and Shaw sat alone, the phonograph silent, the hum replaced by the creak of the brownstone's walls. The echo chamber was gone, but its echoes remained, a warning only he could hear.